Alrighty, dighty. Hello all. This is going to be the part 4 and the final section of this little lecture series, which I've referred to as sets, I think, previously, but we're going to just call it a series now because that's essentially what it is. And we are going to be now talking about solutions. We're wrapping up our segment on teaching history, specifically the problems I find with it, and I guess this sort of just has been an education in general sort of thing now that I'm thinking back on it. But we've sort of explored some of the three main issues I've found with it, because I've sort of neatly wrapped it all up in a bow. And now we're going to be talking about what we can do, specifically what you can do. So this is where we are going to find our solutions to the problem. So, our problems so far, we have lack of political neutrality in our teaching. We have generalization based on modern standards. And we have state departments which refuse to adapt with the times and or help their students get any sort of education at all. So, presented with these issues, what is the solution here? Well, our first solution lies not just with the students. The students are important, but we'll get to them in a second. The first solution lies in teachers. The teachers are the forefront of change. I mean, it's been said here that Susan Litt and Marion Corkin Smith basically note that over the last 2 decades, teacher learning has been in the forefront of efforts for improving education. And that's true. Better teachers, better informed teachers, make for better educators. And those better educators create better students. And those better students create better society. It's a trickle down system. Unlike Reagan's system, which didn't work at all, this one actually does work. This trickle down system actually does something. And specifically, the areas of which teachers need to be focusing on is these conceptual terms: personal theories, practical knowledge, interactive decision making, frames of reference, pedagogical reasoning. So, I mean, what does that mean in context? Teachers need to be not just they don't need to just know what they're teaching about. They need to be able to push forward. They need to be able to take what they're given and really run with it. And obviously, if you guys think back to your time in high school, middle school, elementary school, some of the best teachers you've had, some of the ones you remember really fondly, did this. They made super interactive lessons that didn't even feel like lessons at all. They felt like just play. They made content which was engaging. They genuinely cared for their students and created an environment in which learning was not only easy to do, but there was rewarding. There was a point to it. They created purpose within their own students, which then drove their students to want to learn more. They do it in English, they do it in science, and some of the best history teachers I've had do it in history. They create activities, they create games, they create discussions, they get people involved, because it's really disconnecting to try and just hand somebody a textbook, which unfortunately for a lot of history teachers is sort of the go-to, or at least used to be. Nowadays, they're sort of integrating their lesson a little more. They're integrating other media resources into it, and now they're creating a place to where their students actually feel like there's some skin in the game. They actually feel invested in their education in history. They actually feel like there's a reason to be paying attention. And so, getting more resources, being more creative with what you've been given, and ultimately forming unions and petitioning the state and I guess to the more significant degree federal government for more funding is always a valid option. I mean, I don't know how many of you remember it from years ago, but the Red for Ed walked out. I believe I think it was my junior year, so 2018 or 19. But I mean, while it was really a stunt, it was pretty significant, although it ended up petering out. But things like that are significant and can get people's attention is the kind of things we need. But again, the responsibility doesn't just lie with the teachers, as much as I've sort of implied it does. And I think this little statement here at the end is going to pretty much wrap it up very nicely. History teachers need to possess deep knowledge of their discipline and robust understanding of how to teach it. From this viewpoint, if teachers know their history, it involves interpretation of evidence among members of a community of inquiry, and apply that knowledge, they'll engage with their students in inquiry-based historical interpretation, which is just a big fancy way of saying if they actually know what they're doing and they actually have some idea of their topic and are able to integrate it in a fascinating way, people will pay attention. But then that brings me to my second point, which is the students. Students need to be independent learners. They need to effectively engage themselves in independent learning. I mean, that is the only way we are going to change the system. Is we need to get these students, and young students too. The younger, honestly, in this context, unlike most contexts, in this context, the younger the better. Because when our students understand that in order for them to get something out of their education, they need to put something in, it's going to go a long way. And more importantly, it's going to go a long way for them asking for things. Because if they can understand what they have and what they're not getting, then they can more easily ask for that piece. So, and I think Entwistle says it pretty well here. When they have been carefully planned and properly implemented, attempts at encouraging active learning have been uniformly rated favorably by teachers and students. There is also evidence that freedom in learning or student autonomy, together with good teaching which encourages students to form their own conceptions, will lead to deep approaches to learning which enhance personal conceptual understanding. Which is, of course, again, as I've said before, just a big fancy way of saying if you put something in and if you actually make something that is engaging to learn, they will get something out of it. And that is, of course, what's been missing in most of K-12 education for a long time now, is that sense of why am I here? And then ultimately, this entire thing of education boils down to that one simple concept that every single student at one point in their student career will ask himself, why the hell am I here? It's a very simple sentence. It's one sentence, but it can change their entire learning outcome depending on how that question gets answered. And for a lot of students, that question never gets answered. They don't get a reason. They just get told, well, you're here because you have to be. And that sort of dampens their want and their will to learn. And it's not just history. I focus mostly on history because, again, that's the sort of the conceptual topic of this all and what I want to sort of hammer at. But this applies broadly too. If they don't feel a need to learn, they're not going to be there. I mean, they'll be there in the classroom, but they won't be there. So it's a dual effort. And it's not just a dual effort, too. It's not just on the part of the students, it's on the part of the teachers. It's on the part of the educators as well. So the people who are teaching future educators, people in college, this is very, very important to them. And I want to sort of finish out with sort of what you can do as of right now. So I've introduced all these sort of topics. I've laid them all out really neatly for you. So what can the average student, the average teacher, the average educator do? And I think I'll break it down really neat for you. If you're an educator, if you're teaching other educators in college, you can teach these broad reaching solutions. So teaching your students that they need to be able to be creative, they need to be able to adapt to multiple scenarios, to multiple kinds of students, to multiple kinds of scenarios, be able to move and interact with not just, past events, but current events, history as it happens, and be able to mold that. Teachers currently now, they need to, I think, survey their students, do a sort of a understanding of where they're coming from, and make it really, a really down-to-earth survey. Say, why the hell am I here? Like, really, those kind of questions are really going to hit with students because that's the kind of things they're thinking. Ask them why they think they're here, why they're involved in all of this, because students will give you a very, very honest answers, and you can use that to change your lesson plans, change your material, move even the most rigid of structures, move it as you need fit. And you will find that you will have much higher engagement among students. And for students, I believe is you need to do the opposite. You need to pressure your teachers into sort of presenting why you're here. Why does this information matter? Because when you challenge your teachers, when you ask them the hard hitting questions, they're going to start, they'll think about it, and then they'll ask their staff members, their bosses, the hard hitting questions. So once you get it's hard, no doubt. It's hard to really ask them all these things, but once you get the ball moving and get it working, it'll keep working. We've seen it before. Change is hard, change is slow, but it's moving. So if you start pushing now, it's going to be a lot easier to keep it rolling later, rather than saying, well, it'll be fixed next time, or the next generation will figure it out, or they won't turn out that bad, because they will. They will turn out that bad. So I want to say thank you to everyone who has listened to this. I appreciate your time and your audience. If you have any other questions for me, any concerns, again, you can just talk to me and or write me an email, shoot me an email, aem6033 at nau.edu. And it's been a pleasure to chat with all of you, and I can't wait for the next lecture.